Welcome back. In this session I will talk about how we can archive files. This is actually quite useful, in particular if we have any files we want to upload to a system which we compromised, or if we have files which we want to download, basically kind of, collecting information, or maybe stealing information. And very often this might be compressed as well. So it's very, very common that files, in particular very large files, have been basically zipped, so have been compressed to reduce their storage space. So we look now into archiving and ways of compressing files. I think it might be useful just to clear what we have done, just to start fresh, and maybe just start playing around a little bit and just see what happens here. Good. So if we simply change directory and we move into documents, I think that's a good idea. So we move into documents. And again, pwd shows you where we are. So we are now in Home, Captain and Documents. So this is usually where I would keep my files. Okay. Now let me have a look what we have in Documents. At the moment there's nothing actually there, so there's not much to report. But what we now can do is we can start creating some directories. We can add a few files and just have a bit of fun and play around. So let's do that. Let me just create a few directories. So I just use the make directory command. We have done this before. I can already provide a full structure using the parent option, and then I can type whatever directory 1, and I go into directory 2. I might also go crazy, go into directory 3 and continue as I wish. Yeah, so I just add a few and let's have a look at how that looks like. So now, as you can see, is we have D for directory, so this is D for directory, and then you have again here permissions popping up, and we will come to this later. So we have now directory 1 shown in here, and potentially there are some subdirectories. It's sometimes useful to use the tree command, which is a bit similar. It just gives you a bit more structure, so we can do that. So you can use tree command and you see the substructure of directories quite nicely. Now the tree command might not be installed on your version. So to install it, you have to use the apt install command. And you see this on the slide. I haven't covered this in the online recordings because anyway, this is, I think, fairly straightforward. On the apt command, which is it's a so-called package manager. It's similar if you use Python in the Anaconda environment. There is a built-in package manager, or if you use the pip installer, it's a bit similar in terms of idea. So the IPT has been updated, and on the slides you see the old commands using apt get, which you don't need nowadays. You can just use apt and go straight into install to install commands. Good, so that is nice. So we have now a structure of directories. Now what we can do is we can populate them a bit and add a few files into it. So I just maybe change directory. It's kind of useful to move into them. Let's do this. I go to directory 1, I go to directory 2, and I move maybe to directory 3. So I move all the way down. So now I'm in the third directory, so I'm on this level at the moment, and now I use my touch command and I generate a few files. So I just type in here, I don't have any imagination, just say files. I use curly brackets just to add several files, and I just put some numbers here, and I use an extension, simple standard text files. Yeah, let's just do that. Here we are. So to make sure it's all there, let me just use the ls command, and now we have files here, which looks all fine. So they're all files 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. These are text files, obviously, so you can't execute them. So if you look at permissions, you wouldn't find the X here because nothing is executable. The R is for reading, the W is for writing, and we will come to this. And there are basically 3 different columns here, and we will see this later in how we can change permissions. The first column is the user who is now logged in, or the owner. This owner can write and read these files. The second one is for the group, so basically every user belongs to a group, and people in the group can only read but can't write. And then you have the third one, which is stands for all the other users on the system, and they can only read them. So actually these files, you can read them, but you can't write. Again, you can change and modify these permissions, but just for you to understand what this output actually means. Good, so now we have that created. So what we can now do is we can just move back up. So I just use CD and I do 2 dots. That moves me up to the next level, and you see I now move up to directory 2 level. I can move one further up. I go now to directory 1, and I can move one further up, and I go up into documents. I use the tree command just to see the structure, which is kind of nice. So you now see we have these 4 files sitting here in this directory. So that's quite good. Okay. All right. So now what I could do is I could start an archive. I think that would be maybe useful. It might be nice just to do the following, and then make another directory now on my documents, which I call the archive. Yeah. And again, if I check my tree, I now have an archive directory here, and I have these other structures we constructed before. So that's quite useful. Okay, and the next thing I now want to do is I want to move my different directories and files into the archive. Now there is a command which is called tar, and tar is basically anything linked to archives. So again, if you're not sure about a command, we just look at the manual, and it gives you all sorts of options in here. So there are different options which can be used, and also you will find lots of description for each and every option. Of course, it's a lot, so we don't really go into this in any significant detail. We use a few standard ones like create, so that's the C option here. So that's quite useful, simply to create a new archive. So that's something we use all the time. Apart from that, we also use the F option, which might be somewhere described below. Let's go to F. Might be somewhere. Might have already moved up too quickly. Might be somewhere hidden. So F stands for the actual file I want to move in. And then there are various options about overwriting and so on and so on. Yeah, but most of them I might not really need that much. Yeah, so here, for instance, we have F for file, D is for directory, and so on. Yeah, so these are the different types, basically. Good. I think that should do it. We can now just start playing around a bit. So let's get started using the tar command. I use now a create command, so I use create and I use vf. I have to name it, so let me just name this as the archive new, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. It uses usually the tar extension, so I use the tar extension, and then I just focus on my directory 1, and all the subdirectories will be by default included. So if we execute that, let's see what happens. Again, I use now my tree, and you see now a new type is showing up, this tar, which is my archive. Okay, so if we use our ls command, we can get a few further insights into this. So again, you see here permissions, so we know it's not a directory, it's actually a file, and that's an archive file. If you are unsure about the type of file you created, so you don't know an extension, you can also explore that as well. That can be done using the file command. So if we go into the manual and we type in file, it gives you the type of a file. Yes, if you're not sure about a file, you can try this out. We can just try this out whether this works here. Let's see. Archive new tar. Okay. So now you see that it's a POSIX tar archive. Okay, that's good to know. If you're not sure now what to do with it, again, you can look for documentation that and it gives you some ideas about how this potentially could be used. So you can use the apropos. I'll just also show you the manual first. Apropos command, which gives you a list, a description of things you can do with a certain file. Yes, if you're not sure what to do with a file, you can also check that out. Again, you have further documentation. Good. So that's just a good advice if you see an extension which you haven't seen before. So this tar is an archive file, and there are certain things you can do with it. I think that's quite useful if you are struggling to find help. Good, let's look at some further options here. In particular, if we now want to look into this archive, how do we explore this? Again, we stick to our tar command, and we use the T and F again for the file structure, the T option. Note also in this particular case in tar, you don't need the minus for the options because it has a little bit of different history where this command is coming from. And it gives you the list of the archive. Yeah, so if you go in here, it is in our case archive_new.tar. So that basically shows you the structure. So you see that you have these directories, and you have sitting in the third directory different files which are archived. So that is kind of quite useful. So we have now the structure of it. We can, of course, now also start extracting from it. Yeah? So you can extract from the archive as well, and this is simply using the X option. So it would go like tar xf, and then we have the archive _new.tar. So that's basically an extraction from it. Yeah. So we can again do something like this, and we go back into our structure. Let me just maybe show the tree structure. Here we are. Yeah, so we have sitting on our archive here. Now, ideally, of course, we want to move this into the archive directory. I will do that. Also note, if you extract and you don't specify anything further, it would overwrite whatever is there Yeah, so an extraction of the archive would basically give you the same structure. Of course, nothing has changed in our case. We haven't changed any files. Anyway, they're all empty, so it doesn't update anything. But always be a little bit careful if you extract, to make sure maybe you do this in a certain target folder, if you want to do this operation. The next thing I could do is I could now move my archive. Let's just do this. If I spell correctly, my new archive, I could move it now into my archive directory. Let's do that, and again I just check with tree what happens there. So now I moved it into the archive directory. It's kind of a quite nice thing to do. Good. So now we have done all of that. We looked into various options, extraction, and so on and so on. I think we have covered this all quite well. The other thing I just want to highlight is you can now combine this with additional options for compression. So compression, of course, is used to make sure that we don't use that much space. So if these files are quite substantial, it might be useful to actually use compression. There are different types of compression that are used. The one that is kind of default is the so-called gzip, which is a modest compression, and then there are more advanced versions, so-called bzip2, which is useful for very, very large files. I don't think in most cases that is really what we need. Not for this particular course, certainly not. Now, if you want to use these options, you have to use a different extension. So thus far we use the tar extension. So if you do a zipped version, you have to add tar.gc as an extension, and you have to add the option J. Yeah, so that's basically the difference. So put differently, if you want to create another archive, you can do this here. We can do tar. For creating a C, it would be F for our file options, and then we would have J, the J option for the gzip, and then we have to name it somehow as well. I just now wonder what's a great name. I don't want to make things more complex. Maybe just archive zip. Let's do this. We do the extension tar, we do the extension gz, and I use again the directory 1 in here, and try this, and use tree, and now we have another archive here, but that one is now a zipped one, so that should use less storage in this particular case. Yeah. Again, if we want, we can move it into the archive folder here. So we do this arc zip.tar.gz, and we go into archive. In fact, the work we are doing right now, we can use later some shortcuts, so-called wildcards, where we don't have to type everything out. Yeah, and you will see this in a later session. It's just now, I just stick to the typing, which I usually don't do. I'm a bit lazy. Good, so now we are done. Yeah, so we have done now the archives, we created some files, we archived files, we used the standard way to archive files using the tar extension. Then we used a more advanced version where it's compressed using the gzip standard, and again we stored all of that into a separate directory. So that's actually all we have done. So I think that's a good start. Next we move on to wildcards, editing of files, redirection and piping, and then finally we will talk about networks. I see you in the next session.